Things change, but Deer Park Natural Spring Water is a constant you can count on, bringing you the essence of home for 150 years and counting. Sourced from carefully selected springs, Deer Park Natural Spring Water has naturally occurring electrolytes for a crisp, refreshing taste. Find Deer Park Natural Spring Water at your favorite local retailer today. After 150 years, there's only one thing left to say. Deer Park, that's still good water.
Sergeant and Mrs. Smith, you're going to love this house.
Is that a tub in the kitchen?
There's no field manual for finding the right home. But when you do, USAA Homeowners Insurance can help protect it the right way. Restrictions apply.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Single Tracks Podcast. My name is Jeff, and today my guest is John Calendrille. John has spent decades designing and patenting everything from derailleurs and shifters to dropper posts and brake levers. He's consulted for industry brands including TRP and Box, and now he's got his own company, Vivo, that sells a customizable 12-speed shifter, the Vivo F3. Thanks for joining me, John.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So tell us about your background. How did you first get into designing bike components?
Well, I just wanted to find a way to get into the industry. Back in 91, 92, riding bikes, I was doing cross-country races. And a friend of mine, we went to a race in Mount Snow, Vermont. I think it was 91 or 92. And we were just so into the whole scene and the racing and the equipment and the people surrounding the sport and the businesses, the tech support. And for me, I was just like, how can I do this full time? How can I make my 9 to 5 require me to ride, or I should be going to these events because I need to. So I just wanted to try and get into the industry any way I could. And the first crazy idea that I came up with was called the Grunge Guard, which was just a rubber boot that protected, front and rear derailleurs. I probably had maybe a short list of 5 ideas that I could just create as an intro product. And the Grunge Guard was kind of the most unique and craziest. So I decided to pursue that.
So did you have like a design background? Were you like designing other things and were like, I want to do bike stuff so I can be around bike people?
Yeah, pretty much. I went to school for industrial design, which is basically product design. And I've been working in New York City, as a consultant for a lot of firms, designing anything from packaging to baby bottles to toothbrushes to, airline interiors.
Wow.
When you work at a consultant design firm, you're part of a team, and whatever customers they bring in from whatever industry, it could be any industry, you go through an education process and then you start designing that product for that client. So, the variety was really wide and really challenging and always very interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. So many people have that same story about how they got into the bike industry. Like they just really loved it and, try to figure out like where their skills match up with the bike industry. I mean, today, most people, they're going to like start a YouTube channel or something like, but being a product designer, like that's definitely something that the industry needs and, like really makes a huge impact. So I want to talk about your latest project.
Sure.
The bike shifters. So what are some of the limitations of existing mechanical mountain bike shifters and what makes the Vivo F3 sort of an improvement?
Well, the Vivo F3 is kind of my incarnation of what the ultimate shifter would be. Obviously there are some awesome shifters out there. SRAM and Shimano have great offerings and TRP as well. I just wanted to kind of take it to the next level. I wanted to bring in some, I love CNC aluminum parts, and I wanted to incorporate 3D, printing, and I wanted to also add the aspect of customizable options, for the consumer. So my shifter, at least, the F3 shifter for now, it's a basic shifter which basically pulls and releases cable. I have some other things coming down the line that, have some additional features. But for this one, it's basically taking the construction to the max, using CNC aluminum, just really lowering the weight, titanium hardware all around. It's got cartridge bearings, for smooth action. I've got, I use different types of aluminums in different parts of the shifter, where they're, have the better performance. I use the 7075. And then the customizable option, in working in the industry, we would design shifters over months. First you perfect the mechanism, and then you get into the ergonomics. And a lot of the companies that I worked with, you'd work with, pro riders, and, you'd make some samples, and you'd get a wide range of input from riders. Mm-hmm. This guy likes the lever over here. That guy likes the lever over there. This guy likes, the lever curved this way, that way. And so I thought, well, why don't we put that whole process in the hands of the consumer? Let them choose what they like, and give them some, incredibly, maybe too many options, but, let them choose the, the texture and the shape and the location and all that stuff. So I wanted to kind of, add that too.
Yeah, that's interesting because, the shifter, I imagine too, when you're working with brands like TRP and designing like the whole drivetrain, the shifter is probably like not the thing that they spend a lot of time on. And as a consumer, it's not something that like you're going to upgrade, right? Like you're going to upgrade your derailleur or your cassette or all the other parts, but the shifter is kind of like an afterthought, I feel like.
Yeah, I think for a lot of guys too, but for me, I always had a thing for shifters. It was always, it's a contact point, between the bike and the human hand. And for me, it was something I was always fascinated about. I loved, what Shimano was doing as far as their release systems, multi-release and two-way release. I liked the ergonomics of the SRAM shifters. So for me, shifters were something I always kind of gravitated to. And, because I did some time trial shifters for Vision, back in the day. I did lots of road bike shifters for FSA back in the day. So for me, shifters were always kind of a special thing.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. This kind of brings up another question in terms of like how you design a product like a shifter, where you're saying that you get feedback from riders, and it sounds like they're giving you a lot of different feedback, maybe conflicting feedback. Is that pretty common where
sometimes,
people just everybody wants something different, or are there times where most people kind of point you in a direction and that's like, that's the good design?
Yeah. Well, in the end, it needs to come down to kind of like a group consensus on what direction we should move in. But cockpit layout and hand positioning, I think it's a very personal thing. Different riders have different riding styles, bigger hands, smaller hands. So yeah, we would get a lot of feedback that was, wide ranged. People, some people liked certain positions, and then when we would bring it in house, we might say, oh wow, okay, this is not what we thought, but well, this guy's a pro rider, so who are we to question it?
Right.
But, we do, you did need to design for the everyday rider, because this thing was going to go into production. We were going to be making thousands of these things, and we wanted to appeal to the, the widest possible group of consumers.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, so one of the patents that I read that you hold is a combination brake shifter lever. And that's a design that we see, it's pretty standard on gravel and road bikes today. Where did that idea come from?
That must be an old patent. That may have been from the 90s. So I think the idea on that one was basically taking, the integration of brake and shift that traditionally had been done for road for many years. And then I think I was trying to incorporate that into kind of a mountain version. And I think one of the aspects of that patent was it had a very, very flat mechanism. So I was trying to minimize, I think, that the frontal visual of the shifter. Yeah, but that was a project. If I'm talking about the correct one, I was kind of just borrowing the road technology, trying to bring it into the mountain bike world. And it also forced me to come up with a really wacky mechanism to make that work.
Yeah, I bet.
So it was a bit of a challenge, but yeah, I think that was one of the products that just ended up, as a patent on the wall, and a few, prototypes that I have. I don't believe that went very far.
It does seem like it's pretty applicable today in terms of like bike cockpits becoming, they're super cluttered right now, right? With all the controls that we need for dropper posts and, now motors and everything. So yeah, I mean, do you think, is that a problem that we're going to need to keep addressing in terms of like keeping our cockpits clean?
Yeah, well, I think, a clean cockpit visually, the aesthetic is awesome. But, I think once you start to integrate brake and shifter, you start locking in the ergonomics. You start losing some adjustability. A clean, minimal cockpit is awesome, but what you still want some adjustability on location of levers and angle of levers. So it's really hard to combine both of those features.
Yeah. So with electronic drivetrains becoming more common, a lot of riders are wondering if mechanical systems are going to eventually go away. So what's kind of your take on that?
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting thing. I'm kind of I love the electronic shifting because of the basically the programming and the quote unquote intelligence that you get with the electronics on that. The shifting is consistent and reliable. I'm kind of like a traditional guy. I do like the simplicity of cable moving a derailleur. I think you still get an awesome shift with the cable systems of today. There's no charging. There are no catastrophic failures that you could experience out on the trail.
Yeah.
I think they'll both have their place. I think, electronics are just going to keep getting better and better, but there'll probably be a little segment, where mechanical always hangs in there.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine part of it is price too. I mean, like inexpensive kind of entry level bikes. Like, do you think electronic would ever get to that level, or does it make more sense to stick with mechanical in that situation?
I think as the manufacturing gets more sophisticated, I think they can bring the electronic down to a pretty low price point. The components, at least on the shifter side, are relatively inexpensive. The derailleurs are pretty, I hate to use the term, but maybe overbuilt, and there's a lot of expense and weight on the derailleurs.
Yeah.
But, as manufacturing moves forward, they find ways for any new technology to bring it, further and further down on the price point.
Yeah. Well, what about mechanical derailleurs? Do you think there's still room to improve those? Like, are we going to see lighter weight ones or, just more reliable ones in the future? Is there room for that?
Yeah, I think, the derailleur, that's another thing that's just been, it's such an archaic, old design.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely room for improvement. I think we'll probably start to see some better mounting structures for mechanical rear derailleurs. Hopefully, we can simplify some of the construction. There have been many attempts to move away from the parallelogram structure, which is super old and super archaic, but it's just super effective. There's a lot of patents out there for linear moving derailleurs or derailleurs that move on an arced track or all kinds of anti-parallelogram derailleurs. But when you start building them and putting them out there they don't hold up as well.
Yeah.
So I think, you will see some improvements, but they might be, minor.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned sort of the challenges or perhaps the ability to improve how derailleurs are mounted. What makes derailleur hangers necessary? I feel like these days people, especially with SRAM, moving to the universal derailleur hanger and then moving to direct mount, people started saying, why did we even have derailleur hangers in the first place? Those were dumb. What was the purpose of them? And do you think we can get rid of them?
Yeah, I think we can definitely get rid of them. I mean, I love the coaxial direct mount because you're mounting the derailleur directly to the axis of the cassette, which is the component that it needs to interact with. So,
right.
Why not have a perfect alignment right there? I think, derailleur hangers were really just, carried over from the old days, when, that's when old road bikes were built with, little hanger tabs. And as bikes evolved into mountain bikes, with the early guys, that was the tab hanging on all the frames.
Did it have something to do with like tolerances back then? Like they couldn't get all the bikes to be exactly the same, like in terms of the rear end and how that would like made up to the wheels and the cassette, or was it to protect the derailleur? Was it all of that?
I don't know. I think obviously the idea where the derailleur hanger would become an intentional fail point from impact, I think that came from mountain biking. And I think that's a good thing, where you wouldn't destroy your frame. Although when the derailleur gets hit and the hanger fails, where does your derailleur go? Into your rear wheel. Right. And that's a catastrophe. But there were a lot of frame builders, a lot of independent builders, all building their own dropouts, and the derailleur hanger dimensions, they would always move and vary, and that was that was a problem. That's why the SRAM UDH, it was a standard item, made in high quantity by a solid manufacturer that really used the rear axle as its orientation point. Even though it was a derailleur hanger, it was oriented at the at the rear axle point. And then, ultimately, that is the point where you want to register your derailleur.
Yeah. Makes sense. Well, so you mentioned that the design for derailleurs has been around a long time, and obviously bikes have been around for a very long time, more than 100 years. And the basic form of bikes hasn't changed a lot. So what's your take? Like, aside from e-bikes, is the pace of innovation in the bike world slowing, accelerating? Is it have we reached a plateau?
I think the bike industry is just was so steeped in traditionalism and what had come before. I think now we're starting to see some pretty interesting innovations electronically, but it's still hard to get away from some of the traditional philosophies. It's really it's amazing that we still have an exposed drivetrain.
Yeah.
A chain and cogs and a mechanical thing that moves the chain in and out. That's pretty archaic. Although today's they're super refined and super accurate and super beautifully designed. The overall concept is it's an exposed, mechanical mechanism that we're riding out.
Yeah, where else do you see that?
We're riding out and nowhere. We're riding out in the elements. So yeah, it's a fascinating topic.
Salute big savings this Memorial Day with Blinds.com. Upgrading window coverings can be a minor project with a major impact, and Blinds.com makes it easy. Choose premium blinds, shutters, and outdoor shades, just in time for summer fun. Get unlimited window treatments installed for one low cost, all backed by Blinds.com's 100% satisfaction guarantee. Shop Blinds.com's Memorial Day sale now for up to 50% off, plus premium doorbusters. Save up to 50% at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply. Things change, but Deer Park Natural Spring Water is a constant you can count on, bringing you the essence of home for 150 years and counting. Sourced from carefully selected springs, Deer Park Natural Spring Water has naturally occurring electrolytes for a crisp, refreshing taste. Find Deer Park Natural Spring Water at your favorite local retailer today. After 150 years, there's only one thing left to say. Deer Park, that's still good water.
Yeah, you're right. And it makes it interesting to me that, like, with your shifters, you're able to take something that's existed for so long and to like rethink it and to say, well, wait, like, why do we do it like this? Or why couldn't we improve this thing that we've all been using for a long time and we've gotten used to it? And we're like, this is fine. But yeah, it's interesting that there are still these areas where we can innovate and improve.
Yeah. I mean, the shifter, the F3 shifter, it's a shifter taken like to the artisan level. It's almost like performance art in a way. But the construction is super solid, and the mechanism is really, really robust. I wanted to come up with something that had a really nice action to it. There'd never been a CNC shifter before. And then the adjustability had never been, out there before.
Yeah. Well, I mean, shifters are, to me, they're kind of a mystery. I mean, every now and then you get to pop one open and, replace a cable, and you see inside there's all these little pieces, springs and ratchets and little screws and things. So you're manufacturing and assembling the Vivo F3 shifters in the US. How's that going? Is that tricky to do?
I love doing it because I love these crazy little mechanisms. I know this mechanism inside and out. I've designed, so many mechanisms over the years, and I think this is one of my best. It's very basic. It works really well. It's really enjoyable and satisfying to assemble these things. Put the springs in place and the parts, when they're fit just right. I mean, it's great, and the lubrication part of it is fun and enjoyable. Yeah. So I enjoy it. I have kind of a library of crazy mechanisms that I have. Maybe some of those will come out, later on. But yeah, I enjoy shifters. For me, it's mechanical shifters are ergonomically, I think, even more important than an electronic shifter, where you're just, electronic shifters, it's a fairly light touch, and you're just basically, clicking a button. With mechanical shifters, there's more force involved. So the ergonomics and the feel are more important, because you're pulling a cable. There's a little bit more force on the thumb and the fingers, and so to tune that in just right, I think gives you a better ride.
Yeah. How many pieces are involved in the F3?
I think they're about between 23 or 27 pieces, somewhere in there.
Okay.
All the pieces combined, that includes springs and CNC pieces and 3D printed pieces and bearings.
Yeah. Is this something that a buyer could service or replace a part on their own if they had an issue?
Yeah, I think so. The mechanism is completely you completely disassemble it. It's fairly easy to replace a part. Pull a part out. You can blow it out with a compressor to clean it if you want. You can re-lube it if you want. Yeah, I would say anything above on the top end of the mechanism, you can just unbolt and then rebolt. With just kind of fairly decent mechanical knowledge, you can do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's definitely one of the things that, especially a lot of older riders who started out with mechanical systems and are now seeing these electronic systems come in. I mean, I think the thing that we like about the mechanical systems is that we can understand them probably a lot easier than the electronics, but two, we can work on them ourselves at home. And so, yeah, I mean, is that something that you, as like a product designer and, now as someone who sells shifters, I mean, is this something that you want to like empower people to do on their own because it is mechanical and because it is kind of simple to do?
Yeah, I think, giving the consumer to kind of, change the paddles on the F3 shifter, that's just the first step, taking control of the ergonomics there, unbolting one and rescrewing in another one. If you don't like that, you change it out. But yeah, on the mechanical side, all in the testing phase of the F3, my rider guys, they would pull the outer housing off and relube the mechanism if needed. Check for wear and anything. So I think it's simple enough where someone could go in there and see what's happening.
Yeah, right. And it's interesting because, in like the sort of larger conversation about like right to repair and things, you're seeing again, like bikes are not the only industry that are seeing this with things getting more complicated. And in a lot of other industries, it seems like companies are trying to protect their revenue streams, right? Like they only want to have their people working on their stuff. And, so far in my kind of experience and impression, and it seems like the bike industry is not trying to go that way, that we do have this tradition of like working on our own gear and having these independent shops that are able to work on gear. And so, yeah, it seems like the F3 is kind of in that same vein of DIY and like letting people kind of have more control over their equipment.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I love that aspect of it. And I mean, a lot of the bike parts are kind of disposable in a way. Once a certain part of it fails, you have to throw it out and you just replace it.
Yeah.
I like the possibility of rebuilding and retrofitting parts like that. When I first started out, I would collect shifters, old shifters from Shimano and shifters from Suntour, and I'd open them up and I'd see how they work. And there's a lot of crazy things out there, but it all comes down to, at the bottom line, on the mechanical side, pulling and releasing a cable. But how you do it, there are a lot of different ways to solve that.
Yeah.
And I just, thought that was fascinating over the years.
Yeah. Well, how different are like Shimano and SRAM? Let's say 12 speed, the one that most of us are using. Like, are they both pulling the cable roughly the same amount? Like, is it consistent? Like from shift to shift, you're pulling it the same 1 millimeter or whatever every shift, or is it like increasing or decreasing? Like, do they both kind of handle it the same way?
Yeah. Well, the SRAM and Shimano systems, in total, they're close, but they pull slightly different at certain points in the cassette. Roughly they do, from cog to cog, they roughly pull about the same amount, but it varies. But if you look at the mechanisms, I mean, SRAM has done an awesome job, and I think they've done this throughout the years of simplifying things.
Okay.
And getting an end result or an end performance, with very few parts. And if you look at a Shimano shifter and you try and take that thing apart, if you don't do it correctly, it's just going to explode on you. There are so many more parts on the Shimano side, that basically achieve. Shimano does have a slightly different release feature where you can have a multi-release, but overall Shimano's are much more complicated than the SRAMs. And the TRP has an awesomely robust and fairly simple mechanism as well. I mean, that one was executed really, really well.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I'm also curious about like sort of the role that patents play in all of this. Like, and you're saying that the Shimano and the SRAM shifters are pretty similar. Is that because there aren't like patent protections in place, or they've all expired, and so everybody's able to kind of coalesce around these designs that are kind of the best designs? Like our patents, do they play a big role in how products are designed in the bike industry today?
Yeah, they play a huge role. And just to clarify, the SRAM and Shimano are only similar as far as cable pull.
Okay.
But the actual mechanisms are very different.
So,
yeah, the patents, and this is becoming a little bit less relevant these days because we're moving toward electronic. But the patents are huge barriers as far as how you're going to pull and release cable. So there are lots of patents out there on the mechanisms, the internal mechanisms of how you're going to pull and release cable, also the placement of the levers. And Shimano, they're constantly filing. So it's something that you constantly have to keep up on. And basically, when you conduct your patent research, and you first of all, you've got to find all these things, then you've got to read them, then you have to interpret them. And
right,
in the
that's
end,
hard. Interpreting for sure. Yeah.
Because the language on some of these things gets crazy. But basically, in the end, you're only finding out what you cannot do. So you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. Well, what's left? Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully something that's left is valuable and, will achieve performance. So that whole thing is a big challenge.
Yeah. Interesting.
Not always fun.
Yeah. Well, but even something like a shifter, there's still active patents, a lot of them that you have to kind of work around, or, I mean, because patents in the US anyway, they last, roughly 20 years or so, 17?
Yeah, 17 to 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's some old ones that are still in effect. I think they're starting to file, less. Mm-hmm. Because the development on mechanical shifters is probably not progressing at the rate that it was, in past years. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you certainly need to know what not to do, because, if they want to, they'll shut you down.
Yeah. Is that common? I mean, are lawyers a big part of the industry as well, where they will be aggressive in terms of like protecting these patents?
Well, if their client, being Shimano, tells them to, they will.
Right.
Or ask them to, they will. So, yeah. And, I don't know what the factors are, whether they, when they decide to take action, mm-hmm. whether it's how many units you start to sell, or who knows, but you don't want to try and guess on what that might be. So you just, you steer clear of it.
Yeah.
As best you can.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, getting back to the Vivo F3 shifters, obviously, like you said, you're manufacturing, assembling in the US. Do you foresee challenges with scaling that domestically? Like, it seems like a lot of brands, when they're smaller, they're able to do it in the US, but then you hit some point and you have to go overseas. Do you see that with shifters as well?
With what I'm doing, I'm going to intentionally keep it small.
Okay.
I don't need to blow this thing up and go crazy and, have parts, made in high quantities. So, I mean, if it were to be scaled, then I would have to probably redesign, make the parts more economical to make. Right mm-hmm. now, this was like a shifter that had no limitations. Always when I was designing for companies, there were cost parameters. Mm. We need to hit this cost, or, this part is too expensive, that part is too expensive. This is something I designed, and with no limitations, mm-hmm. I made the parts however I wanted them. It didn't matter how expensive they were going to be, because I was going to CNC them. Mm-hmm. There wasn't going to be any, big upfront tooling charges where I'm making a mold for $20,000, to stamp out, thousands and thousands of pieces. Each piece was going to be CNC'd. Mm-hmm. So this was meant to be kind of a boutique product, mm-hmm. and will probably, stay that way.
Yeah, interesting. Well, which is like more, I guess the word is rewarding for you, like in terms of you personally, like, is it more rewarding to design something with all those constraints, or are you enjoying being able to design without constraints?
Honestly, I love both. I mean, I've designed some lower cost products with Tektro that I'm very proud of. That at a low price point we've achieved an awesome product, and that was a challenge in its own way. Mm-hmm. And those products are out there in the market, and that's, an incredible feeling. And then on the crazy insane high end, I like what I'm doing now. That's just as much fun because it's, it's your own creation, without limitation. Mm-hmm. And it's just fun. So they've both been fun, and they're both rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Do you have plans for a front derailleur shifter, or do you think front derailleurs are pretty much dead for most riders?
Yeah, I have no plans for a front derailleur shifter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you think though that like is where we're at now, like with 12 or 13 speeds, is that going to be enough for us pretty much going forward? Or do you think there's going to be a need for like 14 or 15, or are we going to go back to having a 2x drivetrain or 3x?
Honestly, that would be funny if we went to 2x and back to 3x.
So you're saying it's not going to happen? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. But it's just interesting when you use the word, do you think we need this or need that? Sometimes what comes out in the market, is not really what's needed, but it's just something that might be, part of a marketing effort.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I definitely like the trend of simplicity that we've been on since, Eagle first came out, and, removing the front derailleur, removing the front shifter, moving all, more gears to the back cog. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's hard to predict. The bike industry is kind of crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so what's next for Vivo? You mentioned you've got some stuff. I'm sure you don't necessarily want to give away all your secrets, but like what are kind of the opportunities or the things that you see, or where do you want to like take this company?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just enjoying very much. I'm working with TRP. We're doing some great stuff on TRP, both electronic and mechanical. And, I'm going to continue with what I'm doing with Vivo, just coming up with, kind of out of the box components, like with no limitations. The F3 shifter is the first. I have some other ideas that, will probably add some additional, more interesting shifting features to them. Mm-hmm. It'll, I'll keep it like high end CNC stuff. I mean, it was a challenge to come up with a shifter that was, all CNC, rather than creating tooling. But also on the Vivo side, I've written a book about my business experiences. Part one of my book, which is called Shifting Gears, is out now.
Oh, great.
And it covers 30 years of, my insane journey through the bike industry. Goes all the way back to, those days that I mentioned earlier of driving home from the race in Mount Snow and just wondering, how can I get into this industry? What can I do? And then how do I do it? Going to my first trade show and lining up buyers and manufacturers and, working with Fox and FSA and Box Components and Shimano and, all the crazy things that happen behind the scenes. I kind of just explain the whole deal. It's an interesting.
Well, looking back, do you have any regrets about that decision to join the bike industry, or do you ever wish you're designing baby bottles still?
No, I mean, I pinch myself sometimes today. I'm just like, I'm so blessed to be able to do this full time. This is awesome. I mean, I can go out for a ride and I'm saying, I have to ride today because I have to test some parts. And, I have to ride tomorrow too, because I have to test this and that. And, this cool set of wheels came out and that cool part came out. Well, I've got to buy those because, I've got to stay current with the industry.
That's right. Research.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I love it. It's great. It's really a blessing to be able to do it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, John, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us and share a little of your experience. And hopefully we'll have to check out your book as well. Yeah.
Thanks very much for the time. I really had fun.
Yeah. So you can get more info, check out the shifters at vivocycling.com, and we'll have that link in the show notes. That's all we've got this week. We'll talk to you again next week.